Welcome to the next video in the Patterns in Nature topic. This video will be looking at the dot point, explain the relationship between the length and overall complexity of digestive systems of a vertebrate herbivore and a vertebrate carnivore with respect to the chemical composition of their diet and the functions of the structures involved. So it's a fairly complex dot point, this one. So we obviously first have to look at length and complexity of the digestive systems, but we also need to make sure that we're comparing a vertebrate herbivore and a vertebrate carnivore, and also making sure that we do this in respect to the chemical composition of their diet, so what's in the food that they eat, and the functions of the structures that are involved. So let's just quickly remind ourselves of the human digestive system. So we have our mouth, which, as we looked at in a previous video, is where the first stage of digestion takes place. So the teeth help to mechanically break down the food to increase the surface area. The saliva contains enzymes, which begins the chemical digestion. We then have our esophagus, which is simply the passage from the mouth to the stomach, quite muscular tube, which undergoes a process of peristalsis, which pushes the food down into our stomach. So our stomach contains enzymes and acids, digestive juices, which help to then chemically break down the food before it then passes into the small intestine. In the small intestine, we have the absorption of nutrients and water. The rectum and anus, which is the storage of the final solid waste products before they're eliminated through the anus into the toilet. The large intestine is the last place where the absorption of water takes place. And we also have our liver, which is involved in the production of different chemicals that help to digest the food that we eat. So let's start off by having a look at herbivores. So as we know, the diet of herbivores includes plant material which is high in fiber and starch, which is their main energy source. So the starch, as we know, is converted from the glucose that the plants create during photosynthesis, and herbivores use that starch as their main energy source. We also know this as well. Foods like potatoes, which are high in starch, also provide us with energy because of the carbohydrates that are found in them. So sugars, proteins, oils, and other nutrients are also consumed. So therefore, that's how the organisms get the necessary nutrients from either the leaf material, the bark, nuts, etc. And there's more of an emphasis on the correct mix of nutrients rather than quantity. Okay, so eating a lot of food is not necessarily as important to these organisms as getting the correct mix of nutrients to maintain a healthy digestive system. So we've got a little picture of a koala there, and we know that koalas eat eucalyptus leaves, and eucalyptus leaves do not contain a lot of nutrients. So koalas basically eat 18 to 20 hours a day, sleep. Majority of the day when they're not asleep, they're eating, because they're always trying to make sure that they're getting enough nutrients from the food that they actually do eat. So let's have a look at the digestive tract of herbivores. So most large herbivores rely on microbes in their gut to help them to digest the cellulose. So large herbivores, including things from kangaroos all the way up, to cows, camels, horses, etc. So microbes in the form of bacteria to help break down the cellulose of the cell wall of the plant cells. So in order for the slow process of microbial fermentation to occur, the gut of these herbivores is very complex and quite long in relation to the length of the organism's body. Small herbivores usually eat plant tissue that has less cell wall material, like grasses, and is usually a lot more energy rich than leaves and sort of starchy plants that we mentioned earlier. The gut is normally simple and short in comparison to the grazers and the browsers. However, in comparison to carnivores, it is still quite long in comparison to the overall length of the body, which is something that we need to make sure that we establish throughout this video. So some adaptations of part of the digestive system to allow the herbivores to deal with the type of chemicals in the food that they consume. So they have modified digestive tracts which contain symbiotic microorganisms which assist in the digestion of the cell walls of the plant material. So as we know, a symbiotic relationship, the two organisms live side by side. Again, a mutual relationship. The microorganisms assist in the digestion of the food, and then also they get the benefit of the materials that have been digested. So the microbial digestion allows energy to be available to the host animal, and this is referred to as a process of microbial fermentation. So fermentation is basically just the breakdown of the food, and we end up with carbon dioxide being produced. So microbes are found in the expanded area of the gut. So we have two different types of digestion in herbivores. We have foregut and hindgut digestion, which basically refers to where the microbes are found, whether they're found in the stomach or after the stomach, which is what we'll be looking at in the next couple of slides. So foregut fermentation. So in the foregut, most of the dietary glucose and protein from the plant material is digested. So not a great deal of protein, but any that is there in the food is digested in the foregut. So ruminants, such as cows, have a very complex stomach that is made up of 4 parts. So 2 chambers are used for microbial fermentation, one for storage, and one acts as a true stomach where the food mixes with the digestive juices, enzymes, acids, etc. So food remains in the fermentation chambers for a great period of time in order for the cellulose to be digested. So that's why, as we said earlier, cows basically, herbivores will eat quite often, usually over and over and over again in a day, because their food is so hard to digest. By the time the food they've consumed is digested, that they need to take in more food again. So a kangaroo is an example of a herbivore that undergoes microbial fermentation. So as we can see here, the stomach is quite enlarged, and it makes up 70% of the total gut volume. So basically the gut is the whole, the length from the esophagus through to the colon and the rectum. Okay, so just like cows, our kangaroo has expanded chambers with microbial digestion of cellulose. So there's bacteria that live within the different chambers of the kangaroo's stomach, and the pH is between 5 and 7. So very different to humans, which the pH is usually around 3, so it's very acidic. So in herbivores, it's not quite as acidic. It's actually almost neutral. So we can see here the kangaroo has an extremely long small intestine, which when it's wound up, or if it was to be stretched out, it would end up being 10 to 12 times the total body length of the kangaroo. Okay, herbivores also have this feature called a cecum, and here the kangaroo has a short to medium length cecum, and that's because they're foregut fermenters. We'll have a look at the koala in a second, which is a hindgut fermenter, and we'll see the huge difference in the length of the cecum in this case. We then have the colon, or the large intestine of median length, and fermentation isn't really important here. It's basically just for the removal of any last minute water and the storage of solid products before they're excreted. So hindgut fermentation, this takes place in the cecum, so it's after the gut, so after the stomach. The main difference between this and foregut fermentation is that microbes cannot be digested by the host. So as we can see here, in relation or in comparison to the kangaroo, the koala's stomach is quite small. There's no extra chambers. Still got a fairly long small intestine, but it's nowhere near as long as the foregut fermenter of the kangaroo. Now the big difference we can see here, okay, occurs after the small intestine. So we have this extremely long cecum, so it's about 20% of the length of the intestines, and in hindgut fermenters, it's proportionally the largest of any mammal. It's greatly expanded because this is where microbial fermentation takes place. So the microbes are stored within this area here rather than the stomach. And the colon is very long and pouched, so it's got a very high surface area. And in some hindgut fermenters, the feces may be re-ingested to utilize the nutrients contained in the microbes. Okay, so by increasing the length of the cecum and the colon, then we can make sure that the koalas are extracting as much nutrients as possible from their food, and that we're really helping these microbial fermenters help in the breakdown of the plant material. So let's now compare our herbivores with our carnivores. So we know that the diet of our carnivores means that they eat animal matter, which is digested easily because protein is quite easy to digest. The protein and fat in their diet comes from the skin, muscles, and organs of their prey, and a small amount of fiber comes from cartilage and bones that the organisms eat. Not so much humans. Again, we are more considered to be omnivores, so we wouldn't come under this category, but we know that dogs, lions, large animals will actually eat the cartilage and the bones of organisms that they kill. So the digestive tract of carnivores is relatively short and unspecialized. So there's no chambers in the stomach. There's no fancy microbial digestion taking place. And some adaptations of part of the digestive system. So the stomach, as I said, is fairly simple. Just has the release of enzymes, acids, digestive juices in order to chemically break down the food. The short intestine is short. The small intestine and the large intestine is short relative to the whole body size of the organism. And this is because the food does not need to stay in the digestive system as long because, as I said earlier, proteins and fats are quite easy to digest. And the cecum may be absent or greatly reduced in size, again, because we don't have these microbes present in order to assist in microbial fermentation. So if we have a look at our dog here, we can see the stomach. The stomach is about 60 to 70% of the total gut volume with a pH of 1 or less. So it's extremely acidic. It is quite large in comparison to the size of the dog's digestive system. But if we have a look, the overall size of the dog's digestive system is a great deal smaller than the herbivores. So the small intestine is short, so it's only 3 to 6 times the body length and often relatively wide. So we saw that the kangaroo's small intestine was 10 to 12 times its overall length. So we can automatically see that there's a huge difference in the relative length between a herbivore's and a carnivore's digestive system. The colon is simple, short, and smooth. Again, it just simply allows for the absorption of substances, in particular water, and then the storage of solid wastes before they're excreted. And here we can see that the cecum is poorly developed, or in some carnivores, they may not even be present at all. And this, again, is an evolutionary thing. Over time, the carnivores didn't require it, so it just gradually got smaller and smaller, and in some carnivores, it completely disappeared. So here we can have a look at the digestive systems of carnivores and herbivores side by side. So we can see a ruminant herbivore, in particular here we have a deer. The stomach has multiple chambers, okay, which again, as we said, allows for that microbial fermentation to take place. The small intestine is extremely long, okay, a fairly large cecum. Okay, remember this is a foregut fermenter, so the cecum won't be as long as our hindgut fermenter. Okay, then we have this massively long, large intestine, which leads out to the anus. Okay, we compare that with our carnivore. The stomach is quite small, it's simple, there's no chambers. Our small intestine is extremely short in comparison to the length of the body of the organism. The cecum is also very small. The large intestine is simple and it leads out to the anus for the solid wastes. So from this picture, we can really obviously see there's a huge difference in the complexity and the length of the digestive systems of the herbivores and the carnivores. And it really all comes down to the amount or the type of food that each organism eats. Carnivores eat foods that are easily broken down by the highly acidic environment in the stomach. So the intestines are basically just there to reabsorb the nutrients that are necessary and to push the food through as quickly as possible, whereas our herbivores need extra help to break down the cell walls first and then to extract as many nutrients from the food as possible. So that's why their digestive system is much, much longer. And that brings us to the end of this video. So thank you for watching.